All right, Marcos, thank you very much for a wonderful musical accompaniment. And we, ladies and gentlemen, are ready to start with our very royal tea time. My name is Philip, I'll be hosting this experience, and on behalf of my whole team, I would like to invite you for an afternoon filled with delight, sophistication, freshly brewed tea, and some delicious pastries. And what a better way to enjoy this experience than in a company of a former royal chef. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome on stage Chef Darren McGreedy.
I'm Darren McGreedy, former chef to the British royal family, and I want to welcome you to a very special afternoon tea. Afternoon tea is quintessentially British, but it's carried on all around the world too. And whether it's just been in the UK, where people stop for afternoon tea for tea and biscuits, or it's people getting together to just have afternoon tea and celebrate this tradition and keeping it alive. I'm in southern Florida right now at this beautiful tea room, and that just shows that all over the world people are stopping for afternoon tea.
So the afternoon tea is a quintessentially British tradition. So let's find out a little bit more about what it's all about and how it came to be.
Afternoon tea started in around the 1850s when Anna, the 7th Duchess of Bedford, she was lady-in-waiting to Queen Victoria. She decided that she wanted a little pick-me-up between lunch and dinner so late in the evening, and she sent her maid to the kitchen and said, just maybe a few sandwiches. Well, this became really popular, and then she started inviting her friends over for a little pick-me-up in the afternoon and a stroll around the garden. What can be more quintessentially British than that? Tea at this time was really expensive. It was coming in from China, and there were huge tariffs and taxes on there too. In fact, it was even cheaper to drink gin in England than it was to drink tea. You've heard the saying, mother's ruin, right? Well, that's it. The mums were drinking gin and the country was going crazy. So what they decided to do was actually bring the plants from China, take them across to India, which was part of the colony at the time, and grow them over there. Now we reduce the price of the tea, and suddenly everybody wanted tea. Now I could spend hours talking to you about all of the different teas there are in the world, but some of the royal family's favourites were Assam tea, the Queen liked that for breakfast in the morning. Darjeeling tea, she did enjoy that one too. And then for afternoon tea, of course, everybody loves the Earl Grey tea. It's a black tea with a little oil of bergamot in there, a little orangey citrusy, and it makes it so special. When the Queen was at Balmoral, she loved another tea called Lapsang Souchong. Now, Lapsang Souchong is an oolong tea, and it's actually a smoked tea. Princess Diana, her favourite tea was Rose Pouchon. Now, that's a black tea with little rose petals in there, and she found that very comforting and soothing. The most popular tea, though, across the country in the UK is black tea, and that's the sort of Assam tea, and I think everyone really enjoys that. Me, 5 or 6 cups a day.
So now that we know that everyone has and had their own favorite tea, what I would like to do, ladies and gentlemen, is ask what kind of tea you like to drink, what kind of tea you decided to order today. So, who is Earl Grey tea fan here? Only few? Okay, only 4 of us, 5 of us, alright. What about green tea? Anybody drinks green tea here? Okay, so the rest must probably drink English breakfast, no? Okay, only a few. Maybe Darjeeling? Alright. Well, let's find out also about my teammates' favorite teas. Ari, Adrian, what is your favorite tea? Darjeeling tea, okay. Jana, what tea do you like to drink? Ceylon. And what about you, Michael?
Iced tea is for me, I think.
Alright. We accept all sorts of answers. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, now let's find out a little bit more about tea itself and how it's supposed to be enjoyed in the proper royal manner.
You would think that making tea is easy, but it's not. There's a skill to it, an art to it, and tea actually should be always served as leaves, tea leaves. And tea leaves are just dried leaves. And so what we have to do is hydrate those leaves, and you have to use boiling water. And it really, really has to be boiling. You have to get all the flavor, the infusing of the tea in the water, and open all those tannins into the liquid, and that creates the most amazing tea. The next step is the milk. What goes in first? Is it the milk? Is it the tea? Nowadays, it doesn't matter. The milk can go in first, the tea can go in first, you can drink black tea, you can have a slice of lemon in there, but you don't do lemon and milk together, so it's down to personal choice. But back in 1850, it was really important that the milk was poured into the cup first. Joseph Spode had invented this fine porcelain bone china, and to pour in that hot tea would actually crack the cup. The second reason, we didn't have refrigeration back in the 1850s, and so the milk would be kept in the scullery on a marble counter. Sometimes it would be on the turn, the milk would be off, and remember, I said tea was very expensive, so to pour a little milk into the cup first, and then on top of that, a little tea, just a little. And then to swirl the cup and see if there are any little white bits floating on the top. That told you that the milk was on the turn. And then you didn't waste the precious tea.
So now we understand the importance why back in the day it was important to pour milk in first and then the tea. Nowadays, of course, it doesn't matter. The tea is not as expensive. You can pour tea first and then milk on top. That's what I personally prefer to do, because then you can see by the color how much milk is actually in your teacup. How many of you actually decided to go with tea and milk today? Oh, quite plenty of you. Very nice. Is there anybody who never tried tea with milk before? Oh, maybe you should try it, guys. It's a very, very interesting experience for those who haven't tried it yet. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that we know about the tea, let's also find out about the different types of afternoon tea time, because, ladies and gentlemen, there is more than just one.
A lot of people get confused when it comes to what we're actually calling the tea. Is it an afternoon tea? Is it a cream tea? Is it a champagne tea? Or is it a high tea? Well, an afternoon tea, you would have scones with jam and butter. And of course, all of the other pieces that go with it, the sandwiches and the pastries and the hot tea. A cream tea, you would actually have clotted cream and jam with your scones. A champagne tea was created by all the top London hotels, where they could just double the price by putting a glass of champagne in there. And as Brits, we don't do champagne teas. And then there's the high tea. And the high tea dates back to Victorian times, the 1900s. And the staff would serve the afternoon tea, the dainty pastries upstairs, and then would go downstairs for a high tea at the high table in the kitchen, where they'd enjoy a full meal like cheese on toast and pastries and sliced meats. That's a little trivia for you to enjoy and share with your friends when you do an afternoon tea party. As the price of tea came down, it became more popular, and Joseph Lyons opened up some tea rooms across London, and ladies would scurry around the table in the pinnies of their aprons serving afternoon tea. All the ladies were now allowed out unescorted, and so they would gather and just gossip through the afternoon and enjoy the spoils of a delightful afternoon tea.
And our very royal tea time, ladies and gentlemen, comes with 3 courses. First, we'll serve some delicious sandwiches for you with cucumber and salmon. Then we'll move on to warm British scones. And then, last but not least, we'll also serve some desserts. We'll serve chocolate sponge ganache cake and banana bread cake. And while the first course is being served, let's find out a little bit more about the etiquette of the royal tea time.
A lot of people think that when it comes to actually serving the afternoon tea, that we should bring out all the silver trays. But at Buckingham Palace, that's not the case. The star of the show is actually the china plates. It looks beautiful, it's so pretty, the china is so pretty. Now, when it comes to setting the table for afternoon tea, we don't want a dinner plate on the table. Of course, dinner plates are for dinner. We want a little salad plate so we can help ourselves to a few little pastries. Remember, afternoon tea is not about filling oneself up. It's that little pick-me-up between lunch and dinner. When we set the table, we have a little fork there because we might want to cut into maybe some chocolate cake and not get chocolate all over our hands. And also we have some tongs on the table too. The teacup at Buckingham Palace would always be set so that the handle was always facing the guest. And this is because we didn't know if the guest was right-handed or left-handed. So that way the guests could move it to whichever side they wanted to. When you're stirring the tea, you go backwards and forwards, and not round and round in a circle like a cyclone. Then, once you lift the spoon out, you'll see there's still a little tea on the spoon. Now, if you put that spoon down onto the saucer, it tips on the saucer, and so when you lift the cup up, it just drops down onto the suit or the beautiful dress. So, if you lift up that spoon and then just touch the side of the cup, now the tea drops into the cup and nothing gets spilled.
So as you can see, ladies and gentlemen, there are a lot of nuances to the royal afternoon tea, right? The placement of china, the way you're supposed to stir your tea, and now that you're equipped with all the knowledge and techniques, you can enjoy your tea as a proper monarch. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I would invite you to find out a little bit more about Chef Darren McGreedy himself. Let's find out about how he came to be in the service of the Royal British family.
I've always been fascinated with the royal family. Even as a young boy, I trained at the Savoy Hotel in London, and it was the time of the royal wedding. Prince Charles was getting married to Lady Diana Spencer, and my mother was a big fan of the royal family, and she said, "Darren, we've got to go to the royal wedding." And I said, "Mum, we don't get special tickets." She said, "Let's sleep on the Mall outside Buckingham Palace." And I thought we'd get arrested. But when we got there, there were thousands of people lining the route. And it was while I was waiting there, I thought, how cool would it be to be a royal chef? To work in those royal kitchens right now, to be cooking for kings and queens and presidents. So when I got home, I wrote a letter to the Queen. 2 weeks later, I had an interview. And not long after that, there I was, rattling pans in the royal kitchens. I remember when I first started working for the royal family, I was sent up to Balmoral Castle, and I was going to be working in the pastry section, making all these beautiful tea pastries. But I went up to the castle and the head chef was scurrying through to the larder, and he said, "Darren, come and help me do these carrots for the Queen." And I thought, yes, I get to cook for the Queen right away. We went into the larder and he started peeling carrots, and so I started peeling mine too. And then he cut them all finger length, and then he took my carrots and his carrots and trimmed them so they were all the same size, folded it over into a little paper sack. And then I said to him, "Chef, the Queen really loves her carrots, doesn't she?" And he said, no, they're not exactly for the Queen, they're for the Queen's horse." It really was my first royal job at the palace, peeling carrots for the Queen's horse.
Very humble beginnings for Chef Darren McGreedy. Of course, he didn't peel the carrots for too long. He soon got promoted. So let's see what his next job at the Royal Palace was.
After peeling carrots for the Queen's horse, I got promoted to dog chef. The Queen had 12 corgis when I was working there, and they had their own menu: rabbit, chicken, liver, beef, lamb, rice, cabbage, a la carte menu for these spoiled royal corgis. And every day we'd have to trim all of this meat and cut it into a really fine dice so that the dogs didn't get any bones and choke. The Queen had two fogmen that looked after the dogs, and we called them Doggy 1 and Doggy 2. And they'd come down to the kitchen and take the food upstairs and put it into the bowls so the Queen could feed her corgis.
Anybody here has dogs waiting for them at home? Do you also spoil them, just like the royal family? Yeah? Any private chefs? No? Or are you the private chefs? Alright. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's also see how Chef Darren McGreedy's first encounter with the Queen went down. And yeah, that'll be an interesting one.
I remember the first time I met the Queen. I'd not long started working for the royal family. We were up on Balmoral Castle, just done lunch, and I went for a walk around the castle in the gardens. I was walking along the River Dee, and in the distance, I saw this lady walking towards me, and she was wearing a barber coat and some Wellingtons and a headscarf. And with her, there were some dogs. And I suddenly thought, it's the Queen. And I thought, remember what they told you. First of all, if you meet, it's good afternoon, Your Majesty, and then it's ma'am after that. But don't speak unless she speaks to you first. You've got to speak. We're walking along the boat path together. I was getting so nervous. As we got closer, the royal corgis saw me, and they started barking, all 12 of them, and then they started running towards me. And I suddenly thought, I'm not going to meet the Queen today. And I turned and I started running. And all I could hear, instead of the Queen shouting, stop, come back here, to the dogs, she was just stood there laughing at me running away.
Yeah, very humorous story about the first encounter with the Queen. Ladies and gentlemen, I hope everybody's enjoying their tea and their sandwiches, because now soon we'll be ready to serve the second course, which will be the warm, delicious scones. But before we serve those, let's find out a little bit more about this traditional tea pastry.
When a cream tea arrives, you have beautiful, warm scones, and then some clotty cream and some jam. Homemade jam is the best. And scones, or is it scones? Some people say scones, some people say scones. The Queen would actually say scones for tea. But up north, where I'm from, it would be scones for afternoon tea. You decide. With that, we have clotty cream. Now, clotty cream comes from the south of England. It's region protected. It can only come from Cornwall. And then right next door is Devon. And Devon have their own cream, and that's double Devon cream. Which one's the best? Well, that depends if you come from Cornwall or Devon. But one thing is for sure, when you have clotty cream or double Devon cream, it has to be so thick that the spoon stands up in it. Clotty cream, double Devon cream, is 64% fat. Now in the United States, that would be called butter. But this, on the scones with some jam, absolutely delicious.
And of course, as it goes for everything that comes with a royal tea time, there's also a special way how to eat the scones.
Let's talk a little about the etiquette of eating scones. Scones should never be cut in half using a knife. They should be broken in half, carefully. You see how they break, just like that? And then you take some of the clotty cream, and you don't put it straight onto the scone, you put it on the side of the plate. And then a little jam on there too. The berries in this jam just look amazing. When I worked for the Queen at Balmoral Castle, the Queen's home in the Scottish Highlands, where the royal family go every year in the summer, the royal family used to go picking berries. I remember one time the Queen picking berries with Princess Margaret, and I was walking by the cages and she saw me and she said, can you make some jam with these berries please? And we used to make jam to last all the way through the year with the Scottish berries, which were just absolutely amazing. The little woodland strawberries, the frais de bois, I think they were the Queen's favourite berries. But anyway, on our scones, we then take a little of the clotted cream and put on to the scone, and then a little of the jam. I'm going to enjoy this one, the Devon way. Cream first.
So you could hear Chef Dermot really mentioning that he will enjoy his scones the Devon way, cream first. So let's find out also about the other way, how to eat the scones, the Cornish way, because that's of course totally different.
So what's the difference between a Devon cream tea and a Cornish cream tea? In Cornwall, they put the jam on the scone first, and then they put the cream on top. In Devon, they put the cream first and then the jam on top. They both taste the same, but they look different. Now, in Cornwall, they say the reason that people in Devon put the cream on first is because they're ashamed of it and they want to hide it, so they cover it in jam. I think that's a little bit mean, you know, but they both taste amazing. At Buckingham Palace for the Queen, we would serve plain scones one day and fruit scones with raisins in the next day, and we would religiously alternate each day. So plain one day, fruit the next. Now, it's said the Queen wasn't a huge fan of scones for afternoon tea, but at the end of the meal she would take one and crumble it onto the floor. Now, that's because she had 12 corgis, and the corgis would enjoy having afternoon tea with the Queen. We don't have any corgis on board the ship today, so we'd appreciate you not crumbling them on the floor.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's true. No corgis on board indeed, but we have another animal friend here with us today, and that, ladies and gentlemen, is Stanley the bear. Stanley joined Princess Cruises as a teenage bear back in Alaska, and he enjoyed cruising with Princess so much that he also decided to visit us today here. So please, ladies and gentlemen, welcome Stanley the bear. And our Stanley also comes with our professional photographer here. So if you'd like to capture this moment during the tea time, feel free to do so. For now, we'll take about a 5-minute break so that you can enjoy both your sandwiches and your scones, and then we'll proceed further with our presentation. All right, ladies and gentlemen, everybody took their photos. Yeah. So now let's say goodbye to Stanley. Bye-bye.
Anyone would have turned in a
See you around
phone
the
to this
ship.
bar from that washroom there?
And we, ladies and gentlemen, are ready
No.
to proceed with
Where's the
our
lost and found guest service?
Guest service.
scenes. Now, let's find out a little bit more about how the British royal family actually enjoys their afternoon tea.
It's interesting for me the way the royal family have afternoon tea. They don't sit all around the table like we do when we go to the tea rooms across the country. For the royal family, afternoon tea is about relaxing. At Balmoral Castle, when they've been out in the hills hunting and shooting and fishing, they come into a roaring log fire, and tea is on the sideboard with a small china plate, and they'll go up and help themselves, and they'll sit in the comfy chairs, and it's the only meal that the royal children are allowed to come down and enjoy with them.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, that's true. The British royal family enjoys their meals separately from children, and the afternoon tea is actually the only meal where the whole family kind of gets together, and including the children. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we are almost ready to start serving our last course, which will be some delicious desserts. So let's find out a little bit more about those.
If I could say one thing about the Queen when it comes to food, it's that she's a chocoholic. She loved chocolate. Chocolate cake was definitely one of her favorites. In fact, she loved two chocolate cakes, the chocolate ganache sponge cake and the chocolate biscuit cake. And the chocolate ganache sponge cake is a recipe that actually dates back to Gabrielle Shume, who was chef to Queen Victoria, and it was passed down from king's chef to queen's chef and so on all the way through. And the recipe never changed at all. This recipe, in fact, was actually used for the birthday cakes, and the same recipe and the same cake that just said happy birthday was used for both of the Queen's birthdays. She was a lucky queen. She had 2 birthdays a year, and then for every member of the royal family too. The Queen loved her chocolate cake so much, she would take a small slice for afternoon tea, and then take a mental picture of how much she'd taken. It would go back to the kitchen, and then next day go back up for afternoon tea. I remember one time at Windsor Castle, the chefs had been out for the evening, and we came back and were a little peckish, and we went into the kitchen and started making sandwiches. We lost one of the chefs. We thought he'd gone to bed. The next morning, I came into the kitchen and I was looking for the Queen's chocolate cake, and I couldn't find it. I went back into the kitchen and I said to the chefs, "Where's the Queen's chocolate cake?" And the chef that we thought had gone to bed had been eating the whole chocolate cake. My heart dropped. Quickly, I made another chocolate cake, and then just before the footman came down to take it upstairs, I cut out a little wedge. I don't think the Queen noticed, but if she did, she didn't say anything.
So Chef Dermot McGrady saving the day with a fresh cake and even the cat out so that the Queen doesn't notice anything. And one more interesting thing that Chef Dermot McGrady mentioned in this video is that the Queen had 2 birthdays. Well, that's actually a tradition which dates back to George II. In 1748, he had a birthday. His birthday was in November, and he invited a lot of guests, but unfortunately, because of bad weather, not that many showed up, and he was very disappointed. In fact, he was so disappointed that he decided to do something about it. So he made an act that every British monarch should have an official birthday, right? Regardless of when they were born, there should be a date when the birthday of king or queen is celebrated, and that should be during summertime when the weather is good, right? So that everyone can arrive. And they set the date for the 2nd Saturday of June, and this tradition is still going on. So every British monarch after him inherited this tradition, and yeah, so now everyone knows that the queens and the kings in Britain have 2 birthdays. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we are about to serve our desserts, our chocolate sponge ganache cakes and our banana bread cakes. So let's find a little bit more also about the other desserts that the royal family enjoys during their tea time.
Afternoon tea comes in courses, and so after the scones would be the selection of pastries, like the chocolate cake. And the Queen would alternate tea cakes, different cakes every day, 2 different cakes. And it could be a banana bread, a ginger cake, a Victoria sponge. Victoria sponge was really popular, and I think it's one of Britain's oldest cakes. It was created at Buckingham Palace, just 2 layers of beautiful sponge cake. And then traditionally it would be buttercream in the center, and then topped with caster sugar, like extra fine granulated sugar over the top. And the reason they didn't put powdered sugar and fresh cream in there is because it's a Victorian sponge cake. And often the Queen Victoria, would go off for the weekend to Osborne House in the Isle of Wight, and the cake had to travel with her in a biscuit tin all the way down there with horse and coaches.
Alright, ladies and gentlemen, the cakes are about to be served, and we will take yet another little break so that you can enjoy the desserts. gentlemen, I hope everybody enjoys their desserts. Who enjoyed the chocolate sponge ganache cake more? Okay, not that many chocolate fans here. What about the banana bread cake? I like that one personally. Who enjoyed both? Ah, alright. I see, I see. Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we have one more video from Chef Darren McGreedy. He'd like to tell you a little bit more about the importance of keeping the tradition of the afternoon tea time.
I think we all need to keep the tradition of afternoon tea alive, and you can make afternoon tea at home too. You don't have to have the best china or the best pastries or anything like that. If you have china, you can mix and match. If you want your pastries, you can buy a few pastries just to arrange them neatly on a plate. And sandwiches, just take some sandwiches, cut them into little squares, cut the crusts off. You may get the Queen or one of the royal family coming. But it doesn't have to be really fancy. The sandwiches need to be really soft, so cover them with a little bit of paper towel first, wet paper towel, so they don't dry out too much. And enjoy your afternoon tea at home, because afternoon tea is about spending time around the table with your family and friends. Thank you for joining me for a very special afternoon tea, the Queen's favourite meal of the day. I hope that you'll go home and make afternoon tea for your family and friends. Have a lovely afternoon.
And that's exactly the message, ladies and gentlemen, that we would like to convey to you. The afternoon tea is not as much about the tea and the pastries, but it's about the quality time that you get to spend with your family and loved ones. And with that, I would like to conclude our very royal afternoon tea time. Thank you for coming. My name is Philip again, and let's introduce our whole team here, led by our restaurant manager, Urosh. We have Michael here. We also have Jana, and we have our beautiful Faye here. And no matter what you decide to do for the rest of your day, ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your afternoon, enjoy your evening, and the last day at sea. And maybe I'll see some of you later in the evening here at Good Spirits. Alright, have a good day. Thank you.